Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome to Simmin and Chillin, which is going to be an occasional video series. This isn't going to be regular or anything like that, where I just sit back and play something that's nice and relaxing, and there isn't really much of a point to. I'm not necessarily going to talk much about the game while we play. This is just an opportunity to sit and chat, really, and maybe get some things off my chest, talk about some things that have been happening recently. It'd be a good opportunity for those of you who don't support me on Patreon and have access to my personal blog on Patreon to get to know me a bit better, find out some of the things I've been up to, and just sort of generally get involved. I'm doing this as a straightforward YouTube video at the moment. If people are interested, this is the kind of format that could work really nicely as a stream. My main sort of hesitation with streaming up until this point has been that I just don't know when to do it, basically, because I know so many people from so many different territories, and from chatting to people in the comments and on Twitter and so on, I know that they're scattered all over the world. Some people are in Europe, some people are in North America, some people are in Asia. There's not really a single optimal time that I can stream where everyone would be able to get involved. And I've tried sort of putting out feelers and doing surveys to see when people would find the most appealing for streams, and I haven't really got any conclusive results from that either. But if you are interested in this becoming a sort of stream thing where we can maybe interact and actually chat a bit, then let me know, and I can try and get that sorted out, because streaming is something that I want to give a go, but I also, you know, it's a little bit disheartening to do to stream in particular to an empty room. YouTube I don't mind so much if not many people watch an individual video, because it's just something that I've created. It's something that I've taken the time to put together. I've put online. If no one watches it, doesn't really matter, because I'm still pretty pleased with what I created. Whereas if you're streaming, the kind of live aspect makes you think, well, if I'm doing this live now and there's no one here, is there really any point to what I'm doing right now? You know? Anyway, I found out BeamNG.drive here, which I bought a couple of weeks ago, because I think it was on sale. Was it on sale at the time? I actually think I bought it just before the Steam sale. The reason I bought it is I'd watched a stream by the VTuber Nyanas playing this game, and it looks hilarious. She was having such a good time in this game, and so I thought I'd give it a go for myself. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for simulations of various descriptions, and by that I don't mean what the word tends to be used for today, which is sort of isometric perspective management games, which we used to just call isometric perspective management games, or even just strategy games. By simulator I mean a game which gives you the opportunity to do something which is possible in real life, but which you might not necessarily have the opportunity to be able to do in real life. So my earliest contact with simulators, for example, was with Flight Simulator 2 on the Atari 8-bit and Atari ST, which subsequently became Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm not going to be flying a plane anytime soon, but having spent a fair amount of time with various forms of flight simulator over the years, I know the basic principles of how one works and how to fly one and that sort of thing. And I've always found that sort of thing fascinating. BeamNG.drive is a peculiar one, because it is a simulation. It is quite realistic in some regards, but its main point, its main sort of reason for existence is its damage model more than anything. But in putting that damage model together, they ended up sort of creating a very accurate simulation of all different components of various types of car as well. Various types of car and other road-going vehicles like buses and trucks and that sort of thing. And the result is something that's just fun to just prat around in, basically. There are some structured game modes. At the time I'm recording this, they did a recent update and they broke a lot of those game modes, unfortunately, so that like you don't get any proper feedback on them. In fact, I'll show you what happens now, and that will hopefully give you an idea of what the problem is at the moment. The devs are aware of the issue, because a number of people have mentioned it on various official channels with varying degrees of politeness. And so I'm sure they're aware of it, and I'm sure they're working on fixing it now. But yeah, anyway. So I'm going to drive this Malak 126P, which is just a Fiat 126, basically. The car you see everywhere in Poland. And we're going to do a time trial on one of these simple tracks. So let's go do this obstacles one. I quite like this obstacle course here. And then we press play. And then we do 2 laps around this track. Now in time trial mode, what you normally have is it times you, obviously, and then it will rank you on the various leaderboards. That's what's supposed to happen anyway. I'll show you what actually happens. Off we go. You can play BeamNG.drive from various different camera perspectives. I really like the cockpit mode because it's super immersive. It's got working instrument panels, and sort of the modelling of the cockpit instruments is a part of the simulation that they've paid as much attention to that as they have to the sort of mechanical components of all the cars. And so I figure if I'm going to be pretending to drive a Fiat 126 around an abstract, physically improbable time trial course, then, you know, I might as well enjoy it from a first-person perspective. I've talked about this a little bit before, but I think I mentioned it when I did a Retro Select episode on Midtown Madness. I love driving games where you have shit cars. I know this isn't a particularly widespread viewpoint, judging by some of the comments I got in response to that, but I love driving games where you have shit cars, because I know you are more likely to have a shit car in reality than you are a race car. But for me, that's part of the appeal of having them in a simulation. Is like it's more relatable. It's more relatable to real life. It's something that you probably have direct experience of. Like if someone did a mod for this game that was just a Rover Metro, I'd be over the moon, because I learned to drive in a Rover Metro and it was terrible. But sort of being able to put a Rover Metro in all sorts of ridiculous circumstances would be an absolute delight. But for the moment I have the Fiat 126, which is just as delightful. The reason I have such an interest in this car specifically is because just before I started university, I sort of became involved with the university symphony orchestra, and I did a preterm course with the symphony orchestra that allowed me to sort of get involved in that sort of thing, and that eventually led up to the opportunity to go over to Poland with them and perform with them. So for those of you who don't know, I am a musician. I'm a pianist first and foremost, but I can also play the clarinet and the saxophone, and I have just sort of good general music skills. So I was kind of recruited by them initially as a pianist, but also as a sort of backup percussionist. So yes, I was basically going to Poland to play the triangle, particularly after we discovered, once we got there, so not before we got there, but once we got there, that none of the venues the orchestra was going to be performing at actually had a piano. So there were I think 3 of us who had been recruited to do the piano parts of various different things that we were playing. See, here's the problem. They just fucked up the sort of placeholder data, so it doesn't work properly at the moment. But I'm sure that will get fixed at some point. Anyway, before I carry on with my story, let's just get us into a free roam mode. Let's go to Utah. Let's start at the tourist area, and we'll pick a car once we're there. Yeah, so basically the thing was, I went over to Poland initially with the expectation of playing the piano at least a little bit, but ended up mostly just playing the triangle, which is a surprisingly frightening prospect. Like, you may joke about, oh, he plays the triangle, but you know, playing the triangle and the cymbals and that sort of thing is really fucking terrifying, because you are the only one playing those instruments, and that means if you do your ting or your crash at the wrong time, everyone knows it was you. Everyone knows that it was your fault. What shall we drive? Why haven't I drive much before? There's all sorts of different... None of these are real cars, by the way, but they're all very obviously based on real cars. And they have names that are similar to the real cars, but just different enough to not have copyright issues. Let's take the Passima, because this is a nice boring car. I have the base model with steel wheels and hubcaps. There we go. Look at that. Boring. Absolutely boring, and that is why I love it. Anyway, yeah, so we went to Poland, and I played the triangle and all that sort of thing. That is the important part of the story. The important part of the story is that while we were in Poland and while we were travelling around, we were very surprised to come across the Fiat 126. None of us had sort of been to Poland before, so we didn't know quite how widespread the Fiat 126 was over there. They are everywhere, literally every other car. In fact, probably even more than that. About 4 out of every 5 cars in Poland is a Fiat 126. It just became a joke for us after a while. It's like we'd be sitting in the coach going from one place to another, and yeah, we just feel like, yep, there's another one and another one. There's a queue of 6 of them waiting at the traffic lights. There's another one. That one looks like it's falling to pieces. They all look like they're falling to pieces. Oh dear. But yeah, I sort of developed a passing interest in that car as a result. Not that I ever want to own one, because they look like the sort of car that would probably be an absolute nightmare to maintain. Just because it's that kind of breed of old car that is held together by duct tape and wishes. And you just know that if you breathe on it wrong, it'll fall to pieces, or some part will drop off while you're driving, or something like that. I've been there. I've done that with cars. I had a Ford Fiesta that exploded while I was on the way to work. So, you know, I feel like I've done that part of my car owning history. I have a nice car now. I have a Toyota Yaris, which I own completely now, so I'm not even paying it off anymore. And that is absolutely fine for the moment. I do very few miles on it every year, so it's probably going to last quite a while. I take reasonable care of it. I wouldn't say I take good care of it, but I take reasonable care of it. I get it serviced, so it should last quite a while. But yeah, so that's one element of why the sort of simulation aspect of something like BeamNG.drive appeals to me. The actual crap car aspect. It means that you can have the fun of owning a crap car, because crap cars are often quite fun to drive. But you have none of the sort of ponting around trying to keep it in good condition and that sort of thing. It's just... yeah, you don't have to worry about it. You just, when you feel like driving your shitty car, you click on your shitty car and you get your shitty car out and you enjoy it. And when you don't feel like driving it anymore, when you feel like driving something a bit more exciting, you can do. And when you feel like crawling around Utah roads at 15 miles an hour stuck in traffic, you can too. And why not? I've developed a real appreciation for these sort of mundane type experiences in video gaming, because particularly with the pandemic over the last year, it's just been so nice to do things that maybe you kind of took for granted before. I mean technically there's nothing stopping us going out and going to have a drive right now, which is something I always used to like doing when I was younger. It's like when me and my friends, when we all first learned to drive in secondary school, quite often we would just go out of an evening. It was like, oh, do you fancy just going out? And we're like, yeah, sure, whatever. And we'd go out and we'd drive to one of the local villages. We'd go and find what we called an old man pub. Old man pub is a pub in the middle of nowhere that tends to have a roaring fire going, and a dog that looks more like a bear, and they don't serve like craft beers or anything like that. They serve like proper real ale. They don't know what a Smirnoff Ice is, and it's just nice and quiet. They don't have any blaring music. There's no TV on. It's just a place to go and chill out, hang out with your friends, have a nice chat. So we'd go there, we'd go and hang out for a couple of hours. Those of us who weren't driving would have a drink or two. Then we'd head back. And on the way back, we would stop at the Tesco garage and we'd go and get some pre-packed sandwiches and enjoy a prawn mayonnaise sandwich at 11 o'clock at night. And it was just nice, you know? As I say, technically there's nothing stopping us doing that right now. But there's still the whole sort of hesitance to do stuff that a lot of people have. I know a lot of my friends are very hesitant to go out and do stuff. I'm still quite hesitant to go out and do stuff. There's no way I'm setting foot inside a pub or a club at the moment. Not that I do that a lot anyway, but like as I'm recording this evening is the football match, England versus whoever it is, Italy. It's like I don't want to go anywhere near that shit because, one, I don't like being around football fans at the best of times because it's intimidating and actively unpleasant. And two, that just seems like a COVID spawning ground. And I don't really fancy that. But anyway, it is what it is. So what have I been up to this week? Well, I think most of you who are following me or watching this probably know already, but this is just, I don't know if I'd call it a fun story, but it's a story I think that's worth telling, worth talking about anyway. So for those of you who primarily follow me for my video stuff or Moe Gamer or whatever, if you don't know, I am the editorial manager of a site called Rice Digital. ricedigital.co.uk. It's a website that's been around for, I guess, probably about 10 years or so at this point, I think. At least that. And it started as a site for doujin games, Japanese indie games. And it's gradually built up from there into something, I don't know if larger is the right word, but it's a bit broader and it's a bit more well established as an outlet now. Like if I go to a PR person now and say, oh, I'm from Rice Digital, can I have a review code please? They will generally go, yeah, sure. Which is cool. So yeah, I'm in charge over there at the minute, and we're going around in circles, aren't we? How do you get off this road? I'm in charge over there right now, and this week in particular, but as it turns out for a very long time as it happens, this week in particular we have had some real problems with a guy in the comment section. And this guy in the comment section has been, from what I can make out, has been causing trouble for at least 4 or 5 years at this point. So for example, back in 2016, one of our current freelancers showed me an article from back in 2016 where he'd left probably one of his most notorious comments. It was an article about the best Yuri games. So the best games that featured same-sex romances between women. There's a lot of those. It's a very popular sort of subgenre of visual novels in particular in Japan. There are some other games that incorporate Yuri elements, like Knights of Azure from Gust is one of my favourites. But yeah, so there was a big article sort of summarising some great Yuri games that you can spend your time with. And this guy was the first to comment on it. And his comment was, I quote, "Real lesbians ruined Yuri for me." And basically his argument was that because he had met some real lesbians who he found to be obnoxious for one reason or other. This is not where a car is supposed to go. Oh dear. Okay. Reverse. Carefully. There we go. Beautifully done. Yeah, so his comment was basically, "Oh, I met a lesbian once and I didn't like it." And so from that he felt qualified to judge a very popular I guess subgenre, I guess you'd call it, a very popular side of a creative medium that already doesn't quite get enough attention in the West. And understandably, a few people got a bit upset with him, and he just repeatedly carried on posting not very nice things. With no remorse, with clearly absolutely no understanding for the fact that he was upsetting people. And he just continued. He just continued at this. Obviously for years by the time that I was sort of really made aware of what he was up to. For me, sort of one of the most notable things is that Rise Digital started covering VTubers, virtual YouTubers, around this time last year or so, which would have been sort of like a few months before HoloLive English started up. So it was around the time that the concept of VTubers was already well established in Japan and Asia, but it was just starting to get a bit of a foothold in the West, thanks to VTubers like Korone and Coco, who were sort of deliberately embracing that overseas audience. And so Rice Digital at that point, before I joined them, quite rightly decided that they would start writing some stuff about VTubers because they were an interesting part of Asian popular culture, and the site's remit was to cover video games, anime, manga, and Asian popular culture. So, makes sense, right? This guy, who had been already evidently causing a significant problem in the comments for a lot of people, I look back over his history, and he had left a comment on literally every single VTuber related article saying unpleasant things about VTubers. And like he obviously hated them. He obviously hated the very concept of them, and that's fine. If you don't like the idea of VTubers, I understand why some people might not like them. I understand why some people don't like the corporate angle that companies like HoloLive put in place for its talent. But, you know, there comes a certain point where you think, right, I don't like this thing, so I'm going to stop engaging with it. You know? Yeah? So, like, I don't like football, so I'm not engaging with the England match that is happening tonight. I don't care. I don't need to. I mean, I guess I'm saying it on YouTube right now, but I don't need to go on Twitter and say, "Oh God, I hate the football," or whatever. I don't feel the need to go and leave a comment on a blog post expressing excitement about the upcoming football match. I don't feel the need to rant and rave about how much I hate it and how I think that anyone who does like it is an idiot or whatever. But this guy, as I say, literally every single VTuber related article for a whole year he left a comment on, and he was always the first to comment on them. And so with his attitude, what he'd basically done is he destroyed any sense of community, because evidently people had seen his bullshit often enough to know that oh, well, I might as well not comment because this guy's just going to come along and he's just going to come and shit all over whatever I'm interested in talking about. I understand that completely. I completely get that. And it sucks when that happens because sometimes you'll see something that you really like, that you're really excited about, that you want to know more about, that you want to find fellow fans of, and you want to converse with those fans. And it sucks when, like, the first reaction you get to it is, oh, this is shit, I hate it. Anyone who likes this is an idiot. And so I got several direct complaints about him. They just all happened to come in at the same time. He'd obviously been causing a problem for a while, and he'd been a bit of a running joke behind the scenes for me and my freelancers because we were aware of him, but we thought he was just sort of being a harmless troll for a little while, or at least I did anyway. Evidently, some of the other writers kind of had a bit more contact with him over the years. So yeah, I can only apologise to them for sort of not taking this seriously a little bit sooner. But basically, what happened is that he left a particularly obnoxious comment on a VTuber-related article, and it wasn't just offensive; it was sort of potentially libelous as well. So he was talking about the streamer Nyanas, who I was talking about, who introduced me to this game. And like a common point of criticism of Nyanas from people who don't like her is that, oh, in the past she said things about Japanese artwork that depicts characters who seem to be underage, and she said negative things about that, but she's just pandering to those people because her character model looks like a young anime girl. And it's like, you know, get over it. Because, you know, I personally don't have a problem with that kind of artwork existing. I know a lot of people do, and that's fine. That's absolutely their choice to how they respond to that. I understand why people respond so strongly and negatively to that, and that's absolutely fine. But this guy, he would not let it go. He basically left this comment, and I gave him a warning saying, you know, knock it off. And he fired back with one of those 4chan style composite screenshots that these are all things that she said over the course of the last 10 years or so, and they're all like blurry and they're all zoomed in and taken completely out of context and everything like that. And it's like, mate, just shut up. I don't give a shit. And so what I did is that I posted an editorial column on the site. I do these every so often because I think it's a nice way of sort of connecting with the readership. One of the things I like to do with online writing is kind of recreate the atmosphere of some of the magazines of my youth. So sort of things like Page 6 magazine and that sort of thing. They would always have an editorial column from the editor at the beginning that would sort of talk a little bit about what had been going on recently and the things that were exciting and the things that people were interested in seeing and the things that were likely to be in the magazine soon. And so I like doing that on websites because the very sort of blog-like nature of most websites gives you a good opportunity to talk about stuff like that. And so I posted an editorial on the subject of community standards, and I talked about what was going on, and I talked about the fact that we were going to revamp our comment system. So I'd had direct complaints about this guy, and I decided that we needed to do something about him. Now, unfortunately, part of the problem was that Rice Digital was using a comment system called Discuss, which is quite a popular discussion system on the internet. It integrates very nicely with WordPress, which is why a lot of sites use it. And what had happened is that Rice Digital's comment section, the administration of the Discuss account, no one really knew who was in charge of it, and so that meant that when I took over Rice Digital, I didn't have access to the comment system to be able to moderate comments. So even if I'd wanted to do something about this guy earlier, I wouldn't have been able to because I didn't have access to that back end that I needed in order to do something about those comments. And so behind the scenes, me and various other staff members, we tried everything we could to try and figure out what was going on with this comment system, and if we could track down the password and who owned the account and so on. Eventually we came to the conclusion that the only real option we had was to basically nuke that whole comment system and start afresh. So that's what we did, because there was not really another choice at that point. We'd spent most of the day trying to track down a password or who owned it. We tried several things that it could possibly be, and it wasn't. So yeah, we just nuked it and we started again. And so part of my editorial was explaining that we'd done this, why we'd done this, and the things that we wanted people to take into account besides this. And so as part of re-establishing this comment system and setting it up again, I put some firmer moderation in place. So Discuss has some automatic moderation options. So its loosest options allows you to do things like post images and videos in comments and that sort of thing. And that's fine if you've got a community that can obviously be trusted with them. But it was clear that this guy who had been causing problems on Rice Digital, he was abusing the system to do things like posting that 4chan style composite screenshot that I was talking about. That wasn't a productive addition to the conversation at all. The blog post, the post on Rice Digital that he left that comment on was nothing to do with Deanna's attitude to particular types of artwork. It was, in fact, it was specifically about this game. It was about how much I'd enjoyed watching her stream of this game. And yet he decided that this was an appropriate time to go on a crusade about lolly hentai, and I'm like, no. And so I put these new community standards in place. I said that, right, okay, so from here on, you can't post images or videos in comments. Comments for new articles will be closed after 30 days. 30 days after the article is published, because generally speaking, internet comments are most active on an article just after it's been published. Fair enough. So close them down after 30 days. It saves a lot of work then, because you don't have to go back and moderate and keep an eye on hundreds or possibly even thousands of other articles. This slightly stricter moderation preset that I put in place also had a word filter. So it primarily filters out things like racial slurs and profanities that more people tend to find offensive than not, as it were. I'm sure you can think of at least a few. So I put this word filter in place, and I also noted things like that off-topic discussions, things that weren't directly relevant to the article, weren't going to be tolerated anymore. And the main gist of it was that I wanted people to be respectful to one another. I wanted people to, if they had something to say, I wanted them to bear the feelings of other people in mind. I wanted them to consider that their viewpoint is not the only viewpoint, and that if they don't like something, consider whether or not bursting in and saying how much they hate something, whether that was actually going to add to the discussion or if it was going to start a fight. Now, all of that I thought was pretty reasonable, and I showed it to a few other people, and they said, "Oh, that's perfectly reasonable. In fact, that's a lot more lenient than I would put in place for a comment policy." I was like, "Okay, so this is fine." This guy got super upset about it. He started ranting and raving about censorship and about how much we support these companies that he obviously hates because they once edited one picture to display less cleavage or something like that, and they are censorship, and it's Chinese cancer, and it's all this and all manner of things. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. So after a little bit of back and forth in the comments that ultimately wasn't going anywhere, I closed the comments on that thing. And over at Rice Digital, every Friday we do something called the Friday Letters page, which is self-explanatory. So I accept letters through a widget on the site. I publish them This is another sort of magazine-inspired thing that I do. I accept letters through a widget on the site. I publish them, and then I provide a long and thought-out response that is longer than the format that internet comments provide for. So basically, the reason I incorporated this was twofold. Firstly, it was to sort of... Initially, it was in place to kind of make a little bit less work for us in terms of moderating the comments, but evidently that was a mistake, because the comments do need moderating. But mainly, the reason was it was people to feel like they had an opportunity to be heard, which doesn't always come around with internet comments, because it's very easy for comments to get buried, and as we'd seen with this guy, it was very easy for people to feel like they're silenced. If the first comment in the thread is someone being overly negative and unpleasant about something you're excited about, you're probably just going to think, oh, maybe I won't bother. And like I say, I completely understand that, because I felt that myself. I felt that myself on numerous occasions. I've sort of seen an article on something or a forum post on something, and I thought, cool, I want to talk about that. But then, like, the first comment is someone whinging about something and obviously not wanting to take anyone else's more positive feelings into account. I just get put off from participating. And so, in this installment of the Friday Letters page, this guy wrote in, and he was like, please clarify your new comment policy. I'm concerned about the word filter and its censorship and blah, 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 whatever. You can read it on Rice Digital if you want. It's a fairly... Let's just say it's an example of a certain type of person you get on the internet that I have no patience for anymore. They're the sort of people who sort of flick through their big Osborne book of logical fallacies and like to sort of... They like to sort of do gotchas as often as possible. It's like, well, you said this, and therefore that means blah, 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 blah. And so he posted this letter that was full of this thing. So I fired back with what my colleagues and friends have described as tearing him a new asshole, where I explained how he was making himself look by having a problem with a comment policy that was basically be nice and don't be a dick to people. And then just to emphasise matters, because he complained about the comments being deleted. They are actually still archived somewhere, they're just not on Rice Digital anymore. Because he was complaining about his archives being deleted, and he said, oh, that's very disrespectful. All of the effort and time I put into these comments is wasted now. And so I went back over his comments. Like I said, I decided to explore the things that he'd been saying. That's a little bit cheeky. A little bit cheeky of me, wasn't it? Yeah, I went to explore some of his past comments and see exactly what he'd been saying and see how much effort and time and respect he'd put into his old comments. And I was pretty shocked by some of the stuff that I found. So he was doing things like he would call people names for liking a game that he didn't like. So like the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which came out a little while back, not everyone likes that. And I get that because it's made some changes from the original Final Fantasy VII. But those changes are obviously part of the vision that they have for that remake. Final Fantasy VII Remake existing isn't stopping Final Fantasy VII from existing. And so I think it's cool that they're exploring it in a different direction. But this guy is one of the people who was like, oh, this has no reason to exist. I hate this. Square Enix are the worst. And he'd taken to calling anyone who liked Final Fantasy VII Remake an SJW, a social justice warrior. One of the worst types of people on the internet. And obviously that wasn't productive. That's not productive at all. Not only that, it's nothing to do with the conversation over whether or not you like Final Fantasy VII, because Final Fantasy VII Remake is not filled with what these people call sort of neo-Marxist propaganda or anything like that. It's just a game where they approach the story a little bit differently to maybe how some people liked. But, you know, if you don't like it, then whatever. I don't care. And I doubt Square Enix care either. So, because enough people did like it to make it worthwhile re-releasing it on PS5 and to continue working on the subsequent parts of it. So, you know, fuck you, basically. But yeah, he'd been ranting and raving at this one guy, calling him an SJW for liking Final Fantasy VII Remake. And there was the aforementioned comment about real lesbians ruining Yuri for him. And there was the aforementioned comments on literally every... I'm not exaggerating, it was every single VTuber related post he had commented on. And plenty of other things besides. And he was just being a piece of shit, basically. So, you know, I pointed out some of his most egregious examples and said, look, this is not on. This is not acceptable. You've had your warnings. This is your last warning. If you continue doing this, you are out. Very simple. But he couldn't leave it at that. So he posted a lengthy comment, sort of, you know, one of those comments where he sort of quotes a line of yours and says, well, no, actually, this is what you actually said. It's like, no, I know what I actually said because I wrote it. And so at that point, I just lost patience with him. So I gave him a slightly sarcastic response, but not an offensive response, just a slightly sarcastic response. Then banned him and deleted all his comments. And I haven't heard from him since. Which is great, because, you know, he's a cock. So that's my story for this week. That's been my big happening for this week. Interestingly enough, I normally find situations like this quite stressful. In this case, I haven't found it particularly stressful because in this instance, I've actually been in a position to do something positive about it. In previous situations where I've encountered people like this, I've kind of been sort of powerless to really do anything about it, and people just, in a lot of communities, people just sort of tolerate these people and sort of keep them around as basically an example of how not to live your life. And it's like, I can sort of see the value in that, but at the same time, if someone has been stinking up a community with their rancid opinions for, like I say, at least 5 or 6 years at this point, then it sets a poor impression for that community. And since I've joined Rice Digital, I've been making a very specific effort to show that it's a site where intelligent people hang out, where people who take games seriously hang out, where people who take games with adult material seriously hang out, which is really important, I think, because there's a lot of sites that don't do that. And that's great. So you can set that impression through the articles that you do. But if the comments underneath all of those articles are full of such rancid shit as this guy was spewing on such a regular basis, then you kind of undermine yourself. So you have to kind of back up what you're doing with some firm moderation and ensure that the community goes about its business in a way that is conducive to supporting the site's core missions, as it were. And that all sounds very corporate, I know, but it's how it works, basically. So when you're running a website, it's not just about the stuff you post on that website, it's about the stuff other people post on that website as well. If you think back to the website One Angry Gamer, which is thankfully completely neutered now after its original owner lost interest and sold it to some corporate clickbait farm. The reason why One Angry Gamer was such a joke to the broader gaming community was not just because Billy was such a dickhead. It was because his community was such a dickhead as well. So, like, One Angry Gamer became notorious for having unashamed racism in its comments. Like, people in there using the N-word, sort of referring to people from Asia in ways that you shouldn't refer to people from Asia. I'm sure you can imagine. It's most of the terms that are in my discussed blacklist you would find in the One Angry Gamer comment section at one point or another. And that site was an absolute joke because of it. Which is sort of unfortunate, because One Angry Gamer did have a point. It did have a point to its existence, and if it had taken care to kind of stamp out these problems that it had, then it could have achieved something interesting. It could have genuinely been sort of a leading voice in the fight against sort of Western companies influencing and causing problems with Japanese releases, which people who follow the Japanese gaming industry will know is a genuine problem at times, particularly with companies like Sony. With the most recent example of that being the Doki Doki Literature Club supposedly ended up edited by Sony. That's not an Asian game, but it's very much Asian anime inspired. And the PlayStation version of that had edits made to it because Sony wasn't happy with the existing form of what was going on in it, which is stupid because Doki Doki Literature Club is a horror game, as surely everyone knows by this point. But anyway, yeah, One Angry Gamer completely undermined themselves by, one, having a bad attitude, its creator having a terrible attitude towards just people in general, and also its comment section being possibly the worst I've ever seen on the internet. I mean, I may be showing my sort of innocence and naivety there, but I've not seen a comment section on sort of an article posting website as bad as One Angry Gamers used to be. I know there's forums that are worse than it. There's places like Kiwi Farms and that sort of thing that are worse than that, I'm sure. But One Angry Gamer was the worst comment section I saw on an editorial website. And as I say, it undermined any good that website would have been capable of achieving, just because no one took it seriously. Because people would go, oh, okay, so that site has posted a thing, but there's 1,500 people in the comments all talking about how much they hate black people. So, you know, you'll forgive me if I don't take it too seriously. And I get it. And like, this guy on Rice Digital was not causing as much of a problem as that. But he was still being a problem. He was making people feel uncomfortable. He was derailing discussions, and it was just, yeah, not good. Let's go this way. Yeah, he was just not providing a good experience for other people, and he was upsetting the staff as well as the community. Basically, he just needed to go, because what had obviously happened is that in the past the site had obviously had such lax moderation, and I'm not blaming the previous owners for this at all, because moderating a site like that, particularly one that deals with controversial topics, is a nightmare at times. And I completely understand why people don't want to be asked with that sort of thing sometimes. But yeah, what had obviously happened is that he had the free run of this place for so long that he'd got it into his head that he owned the place. And that meant that he thought he could behave however he wanted, and that was really sort of clear in his response to my response to his letter, because he was saying all sorts of things like, no, that's not how internet comments work. When I said that, look, my argument basically was that, okay, right, Rice Digital is a place where people who like Asian popular culture come to hang out. It's a clubhouse, basically. Yeah. So if you come and spend time on Rice Digital, you are coming into our clubhouse. You are coming and hanging out. You don't have to pay anything. It's a free club. You just come and hang out. You maybe chat to some people who are into anime that you like. You maybe talk about video games a bit. You maybe hang out in the corner and talk about VTubers. Now, if you were hanging out in a real life clubhouse that was kind of put together in that way, if some guy burst in the front door, and I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. If some guy burst in the front door and started ranting and raving about how much he hated the thing that the people in the corner were talking about, you kind of wouldn't want him to come back, would you? Because, you know, you came to that clubhouse with certain expectations. You came to that clubhouse under the assumption that you would be there to hang out with like-minded people. Now, it may be at some point that maybe there were some like-minded people for this guy at Rice Digital at some point, but there certainly aren't at the moment. There certainly aren't at the moment. Neither among the staff nor among the community. But for one reason or another, he had obviously developed the assumption that he owned the place, and that therefore he had the right to define the way that the comments worked and the way that people responded to one another. And I was like, no, this is not your website, matey. I'm in charge here now. I'm literally in charge here now. I am paid to be in charge here. And part of my responsibility in building a website that is enjoyable and welcoming for as many people as possible, I won't say everyone because he's not welcome. Part of my commitment to making sure that it's a website that is enjoyable for as many people as possible is making sure that the comments aren't shitty. And so, you know, you are one person. There are multiple thousands of people who come to Rice Digital every day to read our stuff. You are one person. If you are that one person who's being a dickhead, and thousands of other people are coming to Rice Digital and not being a dickhead, we're going to get rid of the dickhead. And like I say, I suspect we will probably hear from him again this week. He's probably had the weekend to sort of process what happened, because I can imagine that having... Oh, what is going on here? Shut up. Having had so long basically to himself on that website to behave however he wants to behave, I can imagine sort of having that suddenly taken away from him is probably going to be a bit of a shock. And so I'm half expecting some not very nice behaviour from him in the next week. So looking forward to that. Anyway, where are we going? Let's go this way. Yeah, so that is my story for this week. And we had a nice little drive while I've chatted about that. So let's go find somewhere to park up, and then we'll call that a day, I think. And that is basically what this video series is going to be. It's going to be me chilling out with a simulator. I know BeamNG.drive is mostly known for its crashes, but you know, I just felt like having a nice relaxing drive around Utah today. So that's what we've done. It's actually quite a nice car. I mean, it's unremarkable. I think it's a Ford. Like, if you look at that dashboard, that's very much like a Ford dashboard, isn't it? That rev counter in particular. But yeah, I mean, unremarkable, boring. That sums up Ford cars pretty nicely in my experience. Are we going? We pull off here? I think we can pull off here. Yes, you can use your indicators if you want to, but they're assigned to keyboard at the moment, so I tend not to bother with them. I don't think the AI pays much attention to them anyway. I got the AI playing on just normal here. You can put the AI in various increasingly chaotic ways of driving if you want to. In fact, I'll tell you what, just for a bit of fun, before we wrap up, let me just park up while I change these settings. Hold up. AI. Random. Right. Now please enjoy the AI driving like complete idiots. And just to wrap up today, we'll just see how long I survive against these nutcases. I love the random AI mode in this. It's just ridiculous. Just because you'll be happily driving along and you'll just see someone just fly off a cliff, or just wreckage, or a pile up like this, And there's just like no remorse. They just don't bother stopping. It's like if they can drive on the wrong side of the road and they crash into crash barriers. It's a shame that the three-wheelers aren't out at the moment, because the three-wheelers are the most hilarious, because AI on random doesn't know how to drive the three-wheelers properly in this. Where are you going? And they just fall over all the time, and it's brilliant. Yep, another pile-up going on over here. Ooh. You're blocking the road. Get out of the way. Just stay on your side of the road. Smoking wreckage at the side of the road there. I love it. This is one of the best things about this game. It's like you can take it sort of semi-seriously, like I've been doing for most of this session, or you can you can just switch it onto this mode and turn it into burnout. And I love it. We're actually surviving reasonably well at the moment. You just have to be aware that they really seem to favour driving down the middle of the road for some reason. And they're not great at sort of finding a route around each other. And they certainly don't take into account things like coming over the crest of a hill or blind corners or that sort of thing. They just keep going. No. Stop. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my story from this week. It was an interesting time, to say the least, and I'm sure the story's not quite over yet, but I'm sure I'll have more to tell in the near future. But anyway, that is how it stands at the moment. And so I've had a pleasant... No! I've had quite a pleasant weekend, just not thinking about that at all. I mean, I've been checking in on the comments just to make sure he hasn't showed up to cause any more trouble, but yeah. This looks like a good place to park. What do you mean I'm not supposed to be driving in here? There's no road! Is there no road? No, there's no road. This car's not really built for off-roading. Can we get up those steps? Let's find out. No. No, we can't. And now my radiator's leaking. Well. You've done us proud, boring car. But I think now it might be time to sleep. What are you doing there? Why are you there? Still going. Still okay. Still working. Uh-oh. Oh, I think we fucked it now. Yep. No more moving for us. Alright, well, let's pull up there, put the handbrake on. Admire the grass which has got into the car, and the cracked windscreen. Anyway, I think we'll leave that there for now because I've rabbited on for an hour about all sorts of nonsense bullshit. Like I say, this kind of video is not something that I'm going to do on a regular basis. It's just going to be something I do when I feel like it, when I've got somebody to talk about it. Think about it as a sort of gaming vlog, I guess. Are we on fire? No, that's just dust. Think of it as a sort of gaming vlog, I guess. If it is something that you think might be interesting or enjoyable as a stream, let me know. And if you do think it would be enjoyable or interesting as a stream, let me know what sort of times in the week would be good for you as well, because I still have no idea when would be an optimal time for me. It would probably be best for me something like Friday evening UK time would be a good time. Or sort of over the weekend. I normally record videos, so I normally record like Atari A to Z and Retro Select over the weekends. So that's doable, but not necessarily preferable. Or if there's an evening in the week that would work well, like I say, just say. Anyway, that's that for today. I'm going to leave my poor old car to rot in the desert. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.